The Most Mysterious Disappearances of California, Part TWO, When One Becomes Two. The disappearance of Rachel Kim shattered whatever fragile hope remained that Sarah Chen's case was an isolated incident. Detective Marcus Webb sat in the Pasadena Police Department's conference room on the night of November 4, 2019, staring at two photographs pinned side by side on the investigation board. Sarah, smiling in her JPL t-shirt. Rachel, laughing at a friend's birthday party. Two brilliant women who should have been planning their futures. Instead, they were ghosts, present only in pixels and painful memories. "We have a predator," Webb said to his team, his voice carrying the weight of a truth he'd been avoiding for weeks. "Someone systematic. Someone local. And if we don't find him, Rachel won't be the last." The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit was brought in within 48 hours. Special Agent Elena Vasquez, a seasoned profiler who had worked some of the Bureau's most notorious cases, arrived with a 3-person team and an urgency that matched Webb's own dread. "What we're looking at is a highly organized offender," Vasquez told the combined task force on her second day. "His patient. He stalks his victims for weeks, learning their routines, their vulnerabilities." The journal entries both women made show he wanted them to know he was there. He was building psychological pressure, enjoying their growing unease. That's a signature of someone who derives pleasure not just from the act, but from the anticipation. She clicked to the next slide in her presentation, showing a map of Pasadena with 2 red circles marking where Sarah and Rachel had lived, and a larger circle encompassing both, centered almost exactly on Devil's Gate Dam. "He has a comfort zone," Vasquez continued. "This area right here. He knows it intimately. He knows where the cameras are, where the blind spots exist, how to move through it invisibly. That suggests someone local. Someone who's been here for years. Possibly someone whose work gives him a reason to be in these neighborhoods without attracting attention. Like a contractor," Webb said, thinking of the van. "Or a delivery driver. Someone with a vehicle that's so common, so unremarkable, that no one would remember seeing it." "Exactly," Vasquez agreed. "And the fact that he leaves tokens, the white rose for Sarah, suggests he's trying to establish a connection with law enforcement. He wants us to know he exists. He wants credit for his work." That last phrase hung in the air like smoke. His work. As if abducting women was an art form. As if Sarah and Rachel were projects to be completed. The man with the dog. The task force's first priority was identifying the man both women had seen outside their apartments, the man with the dog. Over the next 2 weeks, investigators conducted a massive canvassing operation, showing the photos from Sarah's phone to residents throughout the area. On November 19th, they finally got a hit. An elderly woman named Margaret Stillwell, who lived 3 blocks from Sarah's old apartment, identified the man immediately. "Oh, that's Peter," she said, peering at the photo through thick glasses. "Peter Garrett. He walks his dog past here almost every evening. Has for years. He's always been very polite. A bit odd, maybe, but polite. Peter Garrett. Age 47. Lived alone in a small house on North Los Robles Avenue, less than a mile from both Sarah's and Rachel's apartments. Worked as an HVAC technician, which meant he had access to commercial vans through his employer. Had lived in Pasadena for 23 years. And, according to property records, his house backed directly onto the Jajamangna watershed, the wilderness area that surrounded Devil's Gate Dam. "We've got him," Webb said, feeling something close to relief for the first time in months. "This is our guy." But when investigators arrived at Peter Garrett's house on November 20th with a search warrant, they found something they weren't expecting. Peter Garrett was dead. He had died 3 weeks earlier, on October 29th, 5 days before Rachel Kim disappeared. The medical examiner would later determine it was a massive heart attack. Natural causes. He had collapsed in his kitchen and been dead for hours before a neighbor noticed his dog barking incessantly and called the authorities. Which meant Peter Garrett could not have taken Rachel Kim. And if Peter Garrett was innocent, then the man in the photos, the man both women had seen, was someone else entirely. Someone who wanted investigators to think he was Peter Garrett. Someone who had deliberately chosen to walk a dog and wear a baseball cap to match a real person in the neighborhood, creating a false trail. "He's not just organized," Agent Vasquez said grimly when she heard the news. "He's sophisticated. He's thinking 3 steps ahead. He knew we'd eventually track down the man in the photos, and he made sure it would lead to a dead end." Literally. The investigation had hit a wall. And somewhere out there, the real predator was still hunting. The third woman. Lisa Tran disappeared on December 28, 2019. She was 31 years old, an architect working on affordable housing projects in Los Angeles. She lived alone in an apartment on South Madison Avenue in Pasadena, 2.3 miles from Sarah's old place, 1.8 miles from Rachel's. All 3 women within the same radius. All 3 within the shadow of Devil's Gate Dam. Lisa's disappearance followed the now familiar pattern. She left her apartment on a Saturday morning to meet a friend for coffee. She never arrived. Her phone went dark. Her car remained parked. And in her apartment, investigators found a journal with entries about a man she had been seeing outside her building. But this time, there was something different. Something that would finally crack the case open. Lisa had installed a security camera above her apartment door 2 weeks before she disappeared, a Ring doorbell camera that uploaded footage to the cloud. The last clip uploaded to her account was timestamped 9:47 a.m. on December 28, just minutes before she was reported missing. The footage showed Lisa stepping out of her apartment, locking her door, and walking toward the elevator. But before she reached it, someone else appeared in the frame. A man. Average height. Dark jacket. Baseball cap pulled low. "Lisa," he said, his voice audible on the recording. "I'm so glad I caught you. I'm from the building management. We have a gas leak situation in the basement, and we need all residents to evacuate immediately. Can you come with me to make sure your unit is secure?" Lisa's body language showed hesitation, but ultimately, she followed him. The camera captured them walking together toward the stairwell, away from the elevator, away from the main entrance. Away from any other witnesses. He posed as building management, Webb said, watching the footage for the 10th time. He had a story ready. He was calm, professional. He knew exactly how to get her to trust him. And he knew about the camera, Vasquez added. Watch how he keeps his face angled down the entire time. He never looks directly at the lens. This isn't his first time avoiding surveillance. He's done this before. The FBI's technical team enhanced the footage, trying to extract any identifying details. They analyzed the man's gait, his clothing, the ring he wore on his right hand. They ran voice analysis on the audio, looking for matches in known databases. And then, buried in the background audio of the clip, they heard something that changed everything. A dog barking. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. He brought the dog, Webb said slowly. He's still using it as part of his persona. But why? Peter Garrett is dead. There's no reason to keep pretending to be him unless the dog is real, Vasquez finished. Unless it's his dog. And has been walking it around these neighborhoods for years, creating a pattern that no one would think twice about. He didn't choose Peter Garrett at random. He chose him because he looked like him. Because he could pass as him if anyone asked questions. The task force had been looking for someone pretending to be Peter Garrett. They should have been looking for Peter Garrett's twin. The brother. Peter Garrett had a brother. A twin brother. Daniel Garrett. Age 47. Lived in Glendale, just 10 miles from Pasadena. Worked as a building inspector for Los Angeles County, which gave him access to properties throughout the region and explained how he could pose convincingly as building management. And, according to records the FBI dug up, Daniel had grown up in Pasadena. His childhood home had been less than half a mile from Devil's Gate Dam. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Daniel and Peter had been identical twins, raised in the shadow of the dam by a father who had been obsessed with the area's dark history. According to neighbors who remembered the family, the father, Thomas Garrett, had been a strange, reclusive man who believed the dam was a portal to another world. He had conducted his own amateur investigations into the disappearances that had occurred near the site, filling notebooks with theories about dimensional rifts and supernatural abductions. Thomas died in 2012, Webb told the task force. But before he died, he spent 3 decades poisoning his sons with this obsession. Peter got out, he was the stable one, kept to himself, had a normal job. But Daniel inherited his father's madness, Vasquez said. And he turned it into something worse. On January 3, 2020, a multi-agency team executed a warrant on Daniel Garrett's home in Glendale. What they found inside would haunt everyone involved for the rest of their lives. The House of Ghosts. Daniel Garrett's house was a shrine to his father's obsession. The walls were covered with newspaper clippings about every disappearance that had ever occurred near Devil's Gate Dam, going back to the 1950s. There were hand-drawn maps marking locations, timelines, theories written in manic scrawl across poster boards. The basement had been converted into what could only be described as a research center, filing cabinets full of documents, photographs pinned to corkboards, and a desk covered with surveillance equipment. But it was what they found in the garage that confirmed their worst fears. A dark blue van. Commercial model. No windows in the back. Inside the van, duct tape, zip ties, rope. A top stained with something that field tests indicated was blood. And tucked into a storage compartment behind the driver's seat, 3 driver's licenses. Sarah Chen. Rachel Kim. Lisa Tran. He kept trophies, Webb said, his voice hollow. He wanted proof. Something to remember them by. But Daniel Garrett himself was nowhere to be found. His neighbors said they hadn't seen him in weeks. His employer reported he'd taken a leave of absence in mid-December, claiming a family emergency. His bank account showed his last transaction was on December 30th, a cash withdrawal from an ATM in Pasadena. 2 days after Lisa Tran disappeared. An APB went out immediately. Daniel's photo was sent to every law enforcement agency in California. His face appeared on the news, in newspapers, across social media. The FBI listed him as one of their most wanted fugitives. But Daniel Garrett had vanished as completely as his victims. He knew we were coming, Vasquez said. The timeline fits. We started closing in, asking questions about Peter, and he realized it was only a matter of time. So he grabbed what he could and ran. But where? Webb asked. Where does someone like him go? Vasquez looked at the map on the wall, the map covered with red marks indicating historical disappearances, all clustered around one location. He goes home, she said quietly. He goes back to the dam. The search. On January 7, 2020, the largest search operation in Pasadena's history converged on Devil's Gate Dam and the surrounding wilderness area. More than 200 law enforcement officers, FBI agents, cadaver dogs, and search and rescue specialists combed every inch of the rugged terrain. Helicopters with thermal imaging flew overhead. Divers searched the reservoir behind the dam. Ground-penetrating radar was used to scan for anomalies beneath the earth. The search lasted 6 days. They found caves that had been used as campsites. They found old ritual sites from Jack Parsons' occult activities in the 1950s. They found trash, graffiti, evidence of homeless encampments. What they did not find was Daniel Garrett. What they did not find was Sarah, Rachel, or Lisa. On the 7th day, searchers discovered something that made them stop. In a remote section of the watershed, nearly a mile from the dam itself, there was a small clearing surrounded by oak trees. In the center of the clearing, someone had built a crude altar from stacked stones. And on top of the altar were 3 white roses. Fresh. Placed there recently. Next to the roses was a note, written in careful block letters on weathered paper. They're with the others now. The dam keeps them. It always has. You'll never understand. The handwriting matched samples taken from Daniel Garrett's house. He was here, Webb said, looking around the clearing with growing dread. He was here recently. Maybe watching us search. Maybe laughing at us. Or saying goodbye, Vasquez said. She was looking at something else, marks on the ground near the altar. Scuff marks. Drag marks. Leading away from the clearing toward a section of dense brush and rocky outcroppings. They followed the marks. What they found, buried in a shallow grave beneath rocks and branches, was not what they expected. It was Daniel Garrett. He had been dead for at least 3 days. A single gunshot wound to the head. A revolver lay next to his body. Suicide. He couldn't face capture, one of the FBI agents said. He took the coward's way out. But Webb wasn't so sure. He stood looking down at Daniel's body, thinking about the note. They're with the others. The dam keeps them. He believed it, Webb said quietly. He actually believed his father's theories. He thought he was feeding them to the dam. He thought he was part of something bigger than himself. Delusion, Vasquez said. Mental illness inherited and nurtured by a madman father. That's what this was. Not mystery. Just tragedy. But as they processed the scene, as they searched the area around Daniel's body for any indication of where he might have hidden his victims, Webb couldn't shake a feeling of incompleteness. They had found the killer. But they had not found the women. And in the weeks that followed, despite extensive excavation of the area around the altar, despite forensic analysis of every inch of Daniel's property, despite interviews with anyone who had ever known him, they never would. The question that remains. 6 years have passed since Sarah Chen disappeared on a summer morning in Pasadena. The case file on Daniel Garrett is officially closed. The FBI's psychological profile concluded that he was a serial killer who suffered from delusional disorder, influenced by his father's paranoid theories about Devil's Gate Dam. He targeted women who fit a specific profile, young, professional, living alone, and stalked them for weeks before abducting them in carefully planned operations. He likely killed them shortly after taking them and disposed of their bodies in locations that may never be found. The case is solved, as much as such cases can be solved without recovery of victims. But Detective Marcus Webb, now retired, isn't entirely convinced. Something doesn't sit right, he says, sitting in his home office where he still keeps copies of the case files. Daniel's suicide note. They're with the others. What others? His father never killed anyone. The historical disappearances around the dam were never connected. So what others was he talking about? Webb has spent his retirement researching the history of Devil's Gate Dam more thoroughly than any investigation required. He's read Thomas Garrett's notebooks, obtained through the estate after Daniel's death. He's interviewed historians, folklorists, and descendants of the Tongva people. What he's found has not brought him peace. There have been 23 unexplained disappearances within 3 miles of that dam since 1920, Webb says, pulling out a timeline he's constructed. 23. Some of them were eventually explained. Accidents, runaways, crimes that got solved. But 7 of them, including Sarah, Rachel, and Lisa, never solved. Never found. And here's the thing that keeps me up at night, they follow a pattern. Not a seasonal pattern. Not a pattern based on suspect availability. They follow a ritual pattern. They occur at specific intervals, roughly every 7 to 12 years before Daniel, and then all at once with him. It's like he tried to complete something. Like he was working toward a deadline. Webb shows a photograph of the altar where the white roses were found. We excavated that entire area. We went down 6 feet. We used every piece of technology available. And we found nothing. Not a trace of human remains. Not a shred of physical evidence that anyone had ever been buried there. So where are they? Where is Sarah? Where are Rachel and Lisa? He doesn't have an answer. Neither does anyone else. The families of the victims have never stopped searching. Sarah's parents still offer a reward for information leading to her discovery. Rachel's sister runs a foundation dedicated to missing persons. Lisa's partner started a support group for families of the disappeared. They gather once a year on June 14th, the anniversary of Sarah's disappearance, at Devil's Gate Dam. They leave flowers. They tell stories about the women they lost. They refuse to let them be forgotten. And sometimes, if you're there at dusk when the light fades and the shadows grow long, you might feel what they feel, that the dam holds secrets it will never surrender. That some places accumulate darkness the way others accumulate light. That the veil between the missing and the found is thinner in some locations than in others. Detective Webb doesn't believe in portals. He doesn't believe in supernatural forces. But he believes in patterns. And the pattern at Devil's Gate Dam has existed for over a century, claiming victims long before Daniel Garrett was born and perhaps, troublingly, continuing after his death. Because here's the detail that Webb shares only reluctantly, only with people he trusts to understand the weight of it. In March 2024, 4 years after Daniel Garrett's death, a woman named Jennifer Park disappeared from Pasadena. She was 29 years old. She lived alone on South Oakland Avenue, 2 miles from Sarah Chen's old apartment. She left her apartment one morning to meet a friend for breakfast. She never arrived. Her phone went dead shortly after she left. And in her apartment, investigators found a journal with entries about a man she had been seeing outside her building. A man with a dog. The case remains open. Active. Unsolved. Just like the others. Epilogue: the dream that never ends. California sells the dream of endless summer, golden beaches, palm trees swaying in the breeze, opportunities as limitless as the Pacific horizon. People come here to reinvent themselves, to start fresh, to become someone new. But some dreams turn into nightmares. And some nightmares don't end even when the dreamer wakes up. Sarah Chen is still missing. So are Rachel Kim and Lisa Tran. So is Jennifer Park. So are 3 others whose names time has nearly forgotten, who vanished near Devil's Gate Dam decades before Sarah was even born. Somewhere, their families wait. Somewhere, investigators turn over cold case files, looking for the one detail they missed. Somewhere, someone knows something they haven't yet said. And somewhere in the San Gabriel Valley, in the shadow of a concrete dam built on sacred ground, the past and present blur together. The missing walk alongside the living, visible only in photographs and memories. The answers lie buried in a place that refuses to be searched, in a darkness that resists the light. This is the story of California's most mysterious disappearances. But it's not finished yet. Because somewhere, someone is watching. Someone is waiting. Someone is walking their dog past apartment buildings at dusk, learning routines, building pressure, preparing. And until we understand what's really happening in the shadow of Devil's Gate Dam, until we stop dismissing the pattern as coincidence and start seeing it for what it might be, the dream will keep turning into nightmare. For some, it already has. For others, it's just beginning.